The arrogant manager barked orders at the security guard, treating her like dirt. Little did he know, the person he humiliated controlled everything, including his future. The Spince's corporate headquarters stood tall and gleaming in the heart of the city, a towering glass building that reflected the bustling world below. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with energy. Employees clad in sharp suits hurried through marble-floored hallways, clutching briefcases and balancing coffee cups. Conversations hummed about million-dollar deals, innovative projects, and the company's unstoppable growth. Yotla, Zizanto. On the surface, Spinces was a picture-perfect model of success, a place where ambition thrived and reputations were made. But beneath the polished veneer, cracks in the foundation ran deep. The higher-ups reveled in their power, their arrogance seeping into every corner of the company. Junior employees learned quickly to keep their heads down, and support staff like cleaners and security guards were treated as invisible. It was a system that thrived on hierarchy, entitlement, and a culture that often ignored the very people who kept the building running. Amid the chaos of the morning rush, a figure moved quietly through the lobby. Maya Johnson, dressed in a neatly pressed security uniform, stood by the entrance. She had an air of calm confidence, her sharp eyes scanning the crowd with quiet precision. To anyone passing by, she was just another member of the security team, tasked with ensuring everything ran smoothly. Huh? 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 Let's go eat. But Maya was no ordinary guard. Unknown to her colleagues, Maya was the founder and secret owner of Spinces. Years ago, she'd built this company from the ground up, pouring her heart and soul into its success. However, as Spinces grew, she stepped away from the day-to-day operations, leaving her trusted team in charge. Now, whispers of arrogance, misconduct, and toxic leadership had reached her ears. It was time for her to see the truth for herself, through unfiltered eyes. Stepping into the role of a security guard had been her plan, to observe the culture firsthand. Dressed in her navy blazer, black pants, and polished boots, she blended in seamlessly. Her curly hair was tied back, and she carried herself with quiet dignity. Maya wanted to see how her employees treated those they considered beneath them. She was looking for genuine character, not rehearsed politeness. It didn't take long for Maya to notice the toxic undercurrent. Managers strode past security guards and cleaning staff without so much as a glance. Elevator doors were held open for executives, but closed swiftly when a junior employee tried to step in. In the break room, jokes about the help echoed carelessly, followed by laughter that made Maya's stomach churn. At the center of it all was Derek Colt. Derek was the operations manager, a man who carried himself with a smug arrogance that seemed to infect every interaction. Tall and impeccably dressed, he moved through the office with an air of superiority, his polished shoes clicking against the marble floors. Derek barked orders at staff without a second thought, his voice cutting through the hum of activity like a knife. "Don't stand around, you're not paid to think," he snapped at a junior intern struggling with a stack of reports. When Maya passed him in the hallway, his eyes lingered but not with recognition, just the dismissive glance of someone who saw her as beneath him. "You missed a spot," he muttered, pointing at the floor near her post, even though it gleamed under the overhead lights. Maya simply nodded, her expression unreadable. She had mastered the art of restraint, but inside, every interaction with Derek added fuel to her determination. This was her company, and she wouldn't let entitlement ruin what she had worked so hard to build. The other guards noticed Derek's behavior too. A younger colleague, Jordan, approached Maya during a quiet moment. "He thinks he owns the place," Jordan muttered, rolling his eyes. "You get used to it, just ignore him." Well, yeah, um, Maya gave a small smile but said nothing. She wasn't here to ignore the problem. She was here to fix it. She's certainly different, said Raven. She's genetics. Yeah, if jeans weren't really that important to me, why would I wear skirts all the time? I asked. As the day wore on, Maya continued to observe. She watched as Derek interrupted meetings, brushed off questions from junior staff, and spoke to others with a tone dripping with condescension. She noticed how Ms. Harper, the head of HR, turned a blind eye to his antics, offering a polite smile instead of accountability. Lula Netnarich, mistress said, earlier you mentioned your boss's wife having children, she said in a wider face, unbelievingly. Oh, Maya laughed lightly. Maya's heart sank further when she overheard a cleaner being scolded for taking too long to restock supplies. The man's shoulders slumped as he muttered an apology, his voice barely audible. This wasn't the culture Maya had envisioned when she founded Spincis. She had built this company to be a place of innovation, collaboration, and respect. What she saw now was far from that vision. But Maya wasn't defeated. Every insult, every dismissive glance, and every arrogant remark only strengthened her resolve. She had come to Spincis undercover to root out the problems, and now she saw them clearly. The toxic culture started at the top, and she knew exactly who needed to be held accountable. For now, she kept her head down and her observations quiet. The time for action would come soon enough, and when it did, Derek and his cronies wouldn't know what hit them. Derek Cole was a man who thrived on control. As the operations manager at Spincis, he had built a reputation as someone who got things done, but at a cost. He ruled with a heavy hand, his tone sharp and dismissive. Employees learned quickly not to cross him or question his decisions. For Derek, hierarchy was everything, and anyone beneath him didn't warrant basic respect. Maya noticed him the moment she started working undercover. He was hard to miss, always striding through the office with his chest puffed out, his tailored suits practically screaming superiority. His voice carried through the hallways, barking orders or cutting people down without hesitation. Miss Harper, he called to the head of HR one morning, if I have to remind you again about those reports, I'll find someone who can actually keep up with me. Oh. Harper gave him a tight smile, muttering an apology while clutching a folder to her chest. Maya caught the way her hands trembled slightly. Derek noticed too, and it seemed to amuse him. When it came to support staff like cleaners or security guards, Derek's attitude was even worse. To him, they were invisible, until he needed someone to blame or an ego boost. Excuse me, security, he said one afternoon, waving Maya over like she was a servant. There's a trash can that hasn't been emptied near the break room. Do your job, will you? The trash can in question wasn't full. In fact, it had been emptied earlier that morning. Maya nodded without a word and walked away, her jaw tight but her expression neutral. Derek wasn't done. You're lucky we even let you work here, he added loudly, ensuring others nearby could hear. Not everyone gets to say they walk these halls, even if it's just to clean them. The words stung, but Maya refused to let it show. She had expected this when she took on the role, but it didn't make the insults any easier to bear. Over the next few weeks, Derek's behavior became more blatant. He found small, petty ways to assert his dominance over Maya, relishing in her supposed powerlessness. One day, he made her move furniture in the lobby, claiming it was obstructing the view. Another time, he demanded she escort a visiting executive to the meeting room, a task completely outside her job description. You should be grateful, he said with a smirk. I'm giving you a chance to be useful for once. Maya complied, but every interaction only added to her growing list of observations. Derek's arrogance wasn't limited to her. It struck her again how confident she seemed as she watched him read through the manuscript. I don't see anything. She watched as he belittled a junior intern in the middle of a meeting, snapping, if you can't keep up, maybe this isn't the place for you. The The young man's face turned red as he fumbled with his notes, the other attendees awkwardly avoiding eye contact. In another instance, Derek interrupted an IT technician mid-explanation, saying, "I don't need the details, just fix it. That's why you're here, isn't it?" And here's my point. Our old knowledge systems, once exhausted by illness and death, the number of appliances we need. Maya quietly documented everything. She kept a small notebook in her locker where she wrote down dates, times, and details of every instance of Derek's mistreatment. Her goal wasn't just to expose him. It was to understand the full scope of the toxic culture he perpetuated. One afternoon, while Maya stood by the front desk, Derek approached with his usual swagger. "Still here, huh?" he remarked, looking her up and down. "I guess the hiring standards have really dropped." Maya met his gaze calmly. "I'm just doing my job, sir," she replied. Derek chuckled. "If that's what you call it." As he walked away, Maya noticed a young receptionist nearby, her face pale and her hands clutching a stack of papers. She leaned toward Maya and whispered, "He's always like this. Just ignore him. It's easier that way." Maya gave her a reassuring smile, but inside her frustration was building. Derek's behavior wasn't just a personal flaw. It was a symptom of a deeper problem. His arrogance had gone unchecked for so long that it had become normalized, and others were too afraid to speak up. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment reviewing her notes. She had pages filled with examples of Derek's behavior, toward her, toward other staff, and even toward clients. The evidence was clear, but Maya wasn't ready to act just yet. She needed to see the bigger picture. Her brother, Paul, called to check in on her progress. "How's it going, sis?" he asked, his voice steady and encouraging. "It's worse than I thought," Maya admitted. Derek's behavior is appalling, but it's not just him. There's a culture here that enables this kind of arrogance. "I need more time to figure out who's worth keeping and who needs to go," he continued. "Take your time," Paul said. "When the moment comes, you'll know what to do, and they won't see it coming." The next morning, Maya returned to work with renewed determination. Derek, as usual, wasted no time in finding an excuse to assert his authority. "Security," he called from across the lobby. "You're not paid to stand around. Find something to do, or I'll find someone who will." He pushed Peter Sigler across the lobby and stood of doubting. He put an arm around him. He commanded him to move farther into the room. As they walked, Peter felt ridden by his own oneness, and off and on, a sense of connection occurred. Maya didn't respond. Instead, she observed the way other employees reacted, some with nervous glances, others with resigned expressions. It was clear they were used to this behavior, and that made Maya's mission even more urgent. And before all of that happened, I had my own mask checkup done and almost fell. Okay. She knew the time for action was approaching. Derek's arrogance had shielded him from accountability for too long, but his downfall was inevitable, and when it came, it would be swift and decisive. End of preface. For now, Maya continued to play her part, enduring Derek's taunts and quietly taking note of every insult. She was patient, but she wasn't powerless. The storm was brewing, and Derek had no idea. The tension in the office reached a boiling point. Derek Cole, emboldened by his unchecked authority, grew more aggressive each day. His behavior wasn't just condescending, it was outright humiliating. One morning, Derek stormed into the lobby, his face twisted in irritation. A spill near the entrance had gone unnoticed for a few minutes, and Derek spotted Maya standing nearby. "Unbelievable," he muttered, his voice rising. "Security, get over here." Maya approached calmly, her hands clasped in front of her. "Do you even pay attention to what's going on around here?" Derek snapped. He gestured to the spill. "Clean this up, now." Maya glanced at the spill and then back at Derek. "That's not part of my responsibilities," she said evenly. Derek's eyes narrowed, his voice dripping with disdain. "Responsibilities? You're just a security guard. Know your place." The words hung in the air, sharp and cutting. Employees passing by paused briefly, their faces a mix of discomfort and silent agreement. Derek noticed them lingering and raised his voice further. "This is why people like you stay at the bottom," he sneered, waving his hand dismissively. "If you can't handle the simplest tasks, maybe you shouldn't be here at all." And, uh, Maya's heart pounded, but she didn't flinch. She could feel the eyes of others on her, the weight of their silent judgment pressing down. For a moment, she considered responding, but she held her tongue. Instead, she bent down, grabbed the nearby cleaning supplies, and quietly mopped the floor. Then Derek smirked. "That's more like it." The humiliation burned, but Maya remained composed. She knew her patience was about to pay off. Later that day, Maya witnessed something that solidified her decision to act. A young employee, Claire, was presenting a project update in the main conference room. She was nervous, her voice trembling slightly as she clicked through the slides. "Can you move it along?" Derek interrupted, leaning back in his chair with a loud sigh. "I don't have all day," Claire stammered, trying to regain her composure. "This is basic stuff," Derek continued, rolling his eyes. "If you can't handle a presentation, how are you supposed to handle real work?" The room fell silent. Claire's face turned bright red, and her hands shook as she fumbled with her notes. Maya, standing just outside the door, clenched her fists. She had seen enough. Derek's behavior wasn't just arrogant, it was harmful. It was time to put an end to it. That evening, Maya sat at her small desk in the security office, flipping through her notebook. It was filled with detailed accounts of Derek's actions, each page a reminder of his toxic behavior. She flipped to a fresh page and wrote a single sentence. "Maybe after work I'll hit a few because," she said at last, "I just feel so lost without you. I can't hang around anymore." Tomorrow, the truth comes out. Uh, Maya picked up her phone and made a few calls. Her first was to her brother Paul. "Let's time," she said firmly. And Paul didn't hesitate. "I'll arrange everything. Do you want me there?" "Yes," Maya replied. "I'll need backup when the dust settles." Her next call was to her trusted assistant, Lisa, who had been working behind the scenes to help Maya stay informed. "Can you send out an urgent notice to the board?" Maya asked. "We need everyone in the conference room tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp. And make sure Derek Cole is there." Lisa hesitated for a moment, then said, "Of course, consider it done." Maya leaned back in her chair, her mind racing. She had spent weeks observing the company she had built, seeing it through the eyes of someone at the bottom of the hierarchy. Now, she was ready to reclaim her place at the top and hold the people responsible for its toxic culture accountable. The next morning, the office was abuzz with speculation. An emergency meeting had been called, and no one knew why. Employees whispered in the hallways, exchanging theories. Derek, as usual, was smug. "Probably another one of those boring quarterly updates," he said to a colleague. "I'll nap through it like I always do." At 9 a.m. sharp, the board members filed into the conference room. Paul was already seated at the head of the table, his expression calm but firm. Lisa stood near the door, checking off names as people entered. Derek sauntered in last, glancing around with a raised eyebrow. "What's all this about?" he asked, leaning casually against a chair. "You'll see," Paul replied simply. A moment later, the door opened again. This time, it was Maya. But she wasn't wearing her security uniform. Maya stepped into the room dressed in a sleek black suit, her hair styled neatly. She exuded confidence, her every step commanding attention. The murmurs started immediately. Who's that?" one board member whispered. Derek frowned, clearly confused. Maya walked to the front of the room and stood beside Paul. She placed a folder on the table, its cover bearing the Spin-Su's logo. Paul cleared his throat. "Before we begin, there's someone I'd like to introduce," he said, his voice steady. "This is Maya Johnson, the founder and true owner of Spinsis." The room went silent. Derek's smirk vanished. His face turned pale as he stared at Maya, realization dawning. Maya met his wide-eyed gaze with calm composure. For the past few months, I've been working undercover as a security guard, she began, her voice clear and steady. I wanted to see how my company was really being run, how people were treated when they thought no one important was watching. However, however, why I met her at the door of the hospital usually doesn't happen. Her words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Derek shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Miss Johnson, I didn't know. That's exactly the problem, Maya interrupted, her tone sharp. You didn't know, and you didn't care to know. You treated people with disrespect, used your position to intimidate, and created an environment where arrogance and entitlement thrived. She opened the folder, pulling out a stack of papers. I've documented every incident, she continued. Every insult, every inappropriate comment, every misuse of power. The board members exchanged uneasy glances. Derek's colleagues, who had once laughed along with him, now looked away in discomfort. Maya turned to the rest of the room. This is not the company I built, she said firmly. But starting today, that changes. So, she handed the folder to Paul, who stood beside her. Effective immediately, Derek Cole is suspended pending an internal investigation. And let me make one thing clear. This is only the beginning. Derek slumped in his chair, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of Maya's words. Security guards entered the room, standing by the door. Wait, Derek stammered. This isn't fair. I didn't know. You didn't know, Maya repeated, her voice cold. But you chose to act with cruelty and entitlement anyway, and now you'll face the consequences. The conference room buzzed with the sound of executives settling into their seats, oblivious to the storm about to hit. Derek Cole strode in with his usual air of entitlement. He grabbed a coffee, muttering to a nearby colleague. Another pointless meeting, I'm sure. Let's just get this over with. The managers around him gave polite chuckles, but their unease was palpable. Derek took his seat at the center of the table, reclining confidently and tapping his pen against the glossy wood surface. My wife, Lisa, the assistant who had called the meeting, stood near the door, her expression calm but unreadable. Derek glanced at her and smirked. What's with the serious face, Lisa? It's not like this is an intervention. You know what I like best about you? The fact that you dress for better. Yeah, me too. Think you're looking good. The room quieted as the door opened, and all eyes turned to the figure entering. Maya Johnson walked in. Gone was the security uniform. In its place was a sharp, tailored black suit. Her sleek heels clicked softly against the floor, and her presence commanded instant respect. She carried a thin folder in one hand, her posture poised and confident. Sorry, where do you, Derek's smirk faltered for a split second. He leaned toward a colleague and whispered, Isn't that the security guard? What's she doing here? Maya walked to the head of the table, placing her folder down with deliberate care. She looked around the room, meeting each pair of eyes with a calm but firm gaze. Paul, the acting CEO, stood beside her. He cleared his throat, drawing everyone's attention. Good morning, Paul began, his tone steady. Today's meeting is unlike any other. We're here for an important announcement, one that will shape the future of Spinsis. Derek leaned back, visibly unimpressed. Just get on with it, he muttered under his breath. Paul continued, undeterred. It's my honor to introduce the true founder and owner of Spinsis, Maya Johnson. The room froze. Every conversation stopped. Every sip of coffee was abandoned. Executives stared in disbelief. Derek blinked, his face contorting into a confused expression. Wait, what? He mumbled, his voice barely audible. Maya stepped forward. Her voice, calm yet commanding, filled the room. For the past few months, I've been working undercover as a security guard in my own company, she began. I wanted to see how things operate when no one knows the owner is watching. Derek stiffened in his chair, his knuckles tightening on the arms. Around the table, executives exchanged wide-eyed glances, some sinking lower in their seats. What I witnessed, Maya continued, was eye-opening, and not in a good way. Um, who's a... She opened the folder and pulled out a stack of documents. Let's start with this, she said, holding up an email. An email from Derek Cole, dismissing a junior employee's concerns as irrelevant whining. And then, on the label, Derek's face reddened. I didn't mean... Maya held up a hand, silencing him. This is just one example, she said, flipping through the papers. There's also the time you berated a receptionist for a typo, the time you mocked a janitor for being in your way, and of course, the countless moments of disrespect toward your colleagues. She paused, her gaze locking onto Derek. And then there's how you treated me. Derek swallowed hard. You told me to know my place, Maya said, her voice sharp. You made condescending comments, belittled my work, and treated me like I didn't matter. And you didn't just do this to me. You made it a habit to demean anyone you thought was beneath you. Derek tried to speak, his voice trembling. I didn't know who you were. That's the problem, Maya interrupted. You didn't care to know. You assumed I wasn't worth your respect because I was wearing a uniform. That assumption speaks volumes about who you are. The room remained silent. Derek's colleagues avoided his gaze, their faces a mix of embarrassment and discomfort. Paul stepped forward, his expression resolute. Effective immediately, he said. Derek Cole is suspended, pending an internal investigation. 2 security guards entered the room, their presence unmistakable. Derek stood slowly, his bravado completely shattered. His once proud posture slumped, and his eyes darted around the room, searching for an ally. No one moved. As the guards approached, Derek stammered, Wait, you can't do this. I've been here for years. I've built this department. You've built nothing but a toxic culture, Maya said coldly. And that ends now. The guards escorted Derek out. His colleagues watched in silence, some exchanging nervous glances, others staring at the table. Maya turned back to the remaining executives. Her voice softened slightly, but her words carried unmistakable authority. At my direction, she turned and said to everyone gathered in the room, I told everyone I'd be a few minutes late. And to those of you who have acted with integrity, she said, your jobs are safe. But for anyone who has contributed to this toxic culture, there will be consequences. She placed her hands on the table, leaning slightly forward. Spinsis will be a company that values its people. From the boardroom to the break room, respect and accountability will be non-negotiable. She leaned towards Steve. She straightened, her gaze sweeping across the room. And it starts today. The silence was heavy, but there was a subtle shift in the air. Some executives sat taller, seemingly inspired. Others squirmed in their seats, acutely aware of their own behavior. Maya gathered her folder and turned to leave. Her heels clicked against the polished floor, each step resonating with quiet authority. Behind her, the room remained still. The weight of what had just happened settled over everyone like a heavy fog. For Derek, karma had come swiftly. For Spinsis, it was the beginning of a long overdue transformation. And for Maya, it was the first step in reclaiming the company she had built, with the promise of a better future. The room was heavy with silence as Derek's footsteps echoed faintly in the hall, escorted by security. He had entered the meeting smug and untouchable, but left humiliated and powerless. Maya remained at the head of the table, her composed demeanor unshaken by the weight of what had just transpired. She scanned the room, her gaze firm but calm. Let me be absolutely clear, Maya began, her voice steady and commanding. Derek's behavior wasn't an isolated incident. It's a symptom of a larger problem within this company, and that ends today. A murmur rippled through the group of managers and executives. Some looked nervously at their hands, avoiding eye contact. Others nodded slightly, silently agreeing with her words. Maya's eyes sharpened as she addressed the room. This company was built on values of integrity, respect, and collaboration. But those values mean nothing if we don't practice them at every level, from the boardroom to the break room. Letting her words settle. If anyone here thinks they can continue to operate like Derek did, with entitlement, bullying, and disrespect for their colleagues, let me assure you, there is no place for that at Spinsis. The tension in the room was palpable. Maya's calm tone carried a weight that made even the most senior executives sit up straighter. Starting today, Maya continued, there will be mandatory training programs for every single employee, including the leadership team. These programs will focus on inclusivity, professional conduct, and creating a healthy workplace culture. Lisa, the assistant who had remained a quiet observer until now, nodded approvingly. Maya looked at the team, her tone softening but remaining firm. This isn't just about policies and rules. This is about rebuilding trust within the company and with the people we serve. That trust has been broken, and it's our responsibility to fix it. One of the senior managers, David, cleared his throat and raised his hand hesitantly. Miss Johnson, he began, how do you plan to hold everyone accountable? Will there be ongoing reviews? Maya nodded. Yes, David. Accountability will be non-negotiable. There will be regular reviews of performance and behavior, and every team leader will be expected to lead by example. She took a deep breath, her tone turning resolute. And let me be clear, if you cannot align yourself with these principles, you will be asked to leave. It's that simple. A silence followed her words. But it wasn't the awkward kind. It was reflective. Everyone in the room seemed to be digesting the gravity of her message. Maya shifted her focus to Lisa, who stood near the door. Lisa, she said, her voice carrying a hint of warmth, I'd like you to work closely with HR to develop these programs and implement them immediately. Right away, lifeguarding me will actually make me feel more at home. Lisa smiled faintly, her posture straightening. Absolutely, Miss Johnson. I'll get started right away. I think Pienko. Maya turned back to the room. This is a turning point for Spensis, she said. We have the chance to create a culture we can all be proud of, one where every employee feels valued and respected. She allowed her gaze to sweep across the room, making sure to meet everyone's eyes. This isn't just about removing the bad apples. It's about planting seeds for a better future. A future better for cities. A few nods followed, and some of the tension began to dissipate. The weight of her words wasn't lost on anyone in the room. As the meeting concluded, the managers and executives began to file out, their conversations subdued but thoughtful. Maya stayed behind, watching them leave. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Change never was. But as she looked around the room, empty now except for Lisa and Paul, she felt a glimmer of hope. The toxic culture that had festered for so long wouldn't disappear overnight, but it had met its match. She settled on the wallet hanging from Paul's knuckles, and looking down, trying to get her composure, she took the pulse still. Maya gathered her folder and glanced at Lisa. Let's get to work, she said, with a determined smile. Well, Lisa nodded. Yes, ma'am. Outside, the halls of Spinces seemed a little quieter, a little lighter. Derek's departure was just the beginning, but it was a powerful statement, a declaration that things would never go back to the way they were. Maya walked toward her office, her heels clicking against the floor, her resolve stronger than ever. For the first time in a long time, Spinces had a leader who wouldn't just demand respect, but inspire it. I guess, Spinces said. This was more than a corporate change. It was a reckoning, and Maya intended to see it through to the end. Maya strolled through the office, her footsteps light but purposeful. The air felt different now, cleaner, freer. Employees were moving with renewed energy, their chatter filled with collaboration instead of hushed complaints. The oppressive weight of arrogance and entitlement that had once loomed over Spincis was beginning to lift. Um, you left me a special job opening on the other side of town? As Maya passed by the marketing department, a junior associate paused mid-conversation to give her a small, grateful nod. Thank you, Ms. Johnson, the young woman said softly. For everything. Maya stopped, offering a kind smile. This is just the beginning, she replied. You all deserve a workplace where you feel valued and helping the people who actually matter, she added. Jessica shrugged. It was impossible to hear her unknowns. The associate nodded, her confidence bolstered by Maya's sincerity. Maya continued her walk, observing every corner of the office. She saw employees sharing ideas freely, collaborating in ways that hadn't been possible under the old culture. The difference was subtle, but unmistakable, a sign that the company was on the right track. All our problems had been solved. Our client pool, the most loyal base of all. In the break room, a group of staff members chatted warmly, no longer wary of judgment from management. Maya lingered for a moment, catching snippets of their conversation. One employee mentioned how the recent changes gave them hope for a future at Spincis. Wait. It's amazing what respect can do, another said, earning nods of agreement. Maya's heart swelled with quiet pride. Her decision to go undercover, to witness the truth firsthand, had been a gamble. But now, seeing the small but significant shifts in the company's atmosphere, she knew it had been worth every moment. Every moment was a good one, but she knew she couldn't sit at home, idolizing the victor she'd personally achieved, the department she had worked so hard to build, and a work that she'd needed to do anyway. In her journey through the office, she passed Lisa, who was discussing the new inclusivity training programs with HR. Maya gave her a thumbs up, and Lisa responded with a confident grin. Reaching the conference room, Maya hesitated for a brief second before opening the door. The space was empty, the polished table and high-backed chairs waiting silently, and then the voices of the children beyond the door, parting in a last murmur. She walked to the head of the table, the spot that was hers by right, and pulled out the chair. For a moment, she simply stood there, her hand resting on the chair's back. Memories of the past few months flooded her mind, the belittling remarks, the mocking laughter, Derek's condescending smirk. It all seemed like a distant echo now, overshadowed by the hope of a brighter future. I sat down, the chair fitting her like it always should have. The straight-back chair ending up in the garden looking like a three-dimensional skull. Looking out at the room, she imagined the discussions and decisions that would soon take place here. Conversations rooted in respect, collaboration, and integrity. This table was no longer a symbol of unchecked power. It was now a place where every voice would matter. Maya leaned back, exhaling deeply. This wasn't just about her victory. It was about creating an environment where no one would have to fight the same battles she had faced. The door opened quietly and Paul peeked in. Ready for the next steps? He asked. Maya smiled, her resolve unwavering. More than ready. The story of Spincis wasn't finished, but its new chapter had begun. A chapter where justice prevailed, respect thrived, and every employee had a place to belong.